Young Justice Phantoms returned this week to the HBO Max app for another brand new episode. Once again, I'm Cape Joel, and this is the video series where I give my thoughts and feelings on the episode that was, while also shouting out any comic book Easter eggs or references I can find. So with that out of the way, let's get to it, shall we? So then, this newest episode, entitled The Grasp of the Gods, actually kicks off a brand new story arc featuring Raquel Irvin, aka Rocket of the super duo Icon, and Rocket as our POV character. Now, if you're a longtime fan of Young Justice, then you probably already know that Rocket has had one hell of a stop-start history on this show. She was a big part of the season 1 finale. In fact, they treated like her showing up when she did meant that the Young Justice team was finally complete, only to basically fall off the face of the earth for the rest of the series, showing up a very small amount and a lot of times showing up not even in costume. Why was that? Well, I can't 100% confirm it. I am almost certain that it had something to do with the ongoing legal battle between DC Entertainment and the McDuffie estate. You see, characters like Rocket and even Static didn't actually get their start in DC Comics. They were created by Dwayne McDuffie and others over in Milestone Comics. Milestone would eventually get folded into the greater DC universe, then they'd lie dormant for a bit, then in 2015 they talked about bringing all the characters back, only for a big lawsuit to start taking place when the McDuffie estate, made up of Dwayne McDuffie's widow and mother, weren't actually getting paid the money they deserved. If I had to guess, Greg Weisman and the others didn't know what characters they could use, didn't want to rock the boat, didn't know if they were going to be able to use any of these characters in the future, so they just chose not to. Thankfully, in 2019, the lawsuit got settled, the Milestone characters were allowed to be published again by DC, and now not only does Rocky get to be in the opening credits, but she gets an entire arc dedicated to herself. As we join the episode proper, we see Raquel trying to deal with the day-to-day challenges posed by parenting an autistic child, in this case her son, Amistad. I don't know about you, but I think one of my favorite things about this new season of Young Justice is getting to see so many of our favorite heroes forced to deal with very real, very human issues that they can't simply use their powers to get out of. Now, Amistad, full name Amistad Augustus Irvin, obviously a reference to Icon, Rocket's mentor, is in fact actually a character from the comics, just one who didn't actually have a lot written about him at the time. It's also interesting to note, if you're a trivia buff, that Rocket just so happens to be comic book's very first single teen mother superhero. Though I'm uncertain if that timeline still holds up in the show itself. We see Rocket drop her son off with his father, who I cannot help but feel looks like he's modeled after famous Milestone artist and Rocket co-creator Dennis Cowan. Raquel, we discover, is being called away on important Justice League business that sees her, Jay Garrick, the Flash, and Forager return to planet New Genesis as part of a larger superhuman summit between themselves, the New Gods, and even the Green Lanterns of Oa. No doubt, seeing as the Light and their allies are an intergalactic threat, not just an Earth threat, the heroes want to follow suit and shore up their own spacefaring alliances. The New Gods themselves get a real strong showing in this episode. We're reintroduced to the war dog Orion, who when we first saw him in the show was actually Megan's brother in disguise, as well as fan favorites such as Light Ray, Highfather, and most surprisingly of all, Avia, a character who died the same issue she debuted all the way back in the 70s. Once again, Young Justice deep cuts remain undefeated. This return also just so happens to be a big deal for Forager, as this is his first time returning home after leaving. He's also the first bug ever to have an audience with Highfather in Supertown, and it's made abundantly clear very early on that bugs are seen as second-class citizens on New Genesis, even if the New Gods and Highfather are too polite to say so outright. Their discomfort is clear to see. The hero's timing, as is so often the case, couldn't be worse, as at the same time they arrive, another Forager bug, a female no less, undertakes a daring heist to steal New God tech. Rocket and Orion volunteer to give chase, but the bug ultimately manages to give them the slip, showing a much better understanding of the planet's surface environment than the seemingly much more advanced New Gods do. We're also shown during this chase that despite his rough and tough exterior, Orion actually suffers from claustrophobia, no doubt a leftover from his harsh upbringing on Apokolips. Oh yeah, the show doesn't come out and say it right away, but as a comic reader, I already know that Orion just so happens to be one of the many sons of Darkseid that was traded for scot-free as a boy in an attempt to broker peace between the two worlds. And despite all the hard work and best efforts of Highfather, Orion still occasionally taps into the darker side of his his family tree. Connor was also back again in this episode in a greatly expanded subplot that saw a whole lot of movement. Superboy continues to hallucinate people from his past, including Lex Luthor. I personally very much enjoyed the reprise of Connor's first big monologue from the first episode of Young Justice, wherein he states his intended purpose. These hallucinations only get more vivid too, coming to a major head when Superboy dreams a world wherein he was never saved from Lex's clutches and ultimately became the super weapon he was built to be. This was a really clever little aside, and I have to wonder if this was meant to be a whole what-if style of episode at one point in production. Back on New Genesis, our heroes learn more about what the other Forager stole. Turns out it's an ancient, outmoded power source that, despite being so old the new gods were essentially throwing it away, they still feel the bugs can't be trusted with it. In short, a bug stole some garbage from the beautiful sky people who think that it's a problem because the bugs are considered such lesser beings they'd only hurt themselves or someone else with it. If that sounds like the show is touching on some real class issues, you would be correct. In fact, we can see a lot of parallels between this story, what was going on in Atlantis, and what was going on in Mars, the eternal battle between the haves and have-nots being a major recurring theme throughout this season. But get ready, because this theme takes on a whole other dimension too when we see what Ms.Forager has been up to. It seems that he's using his shape-shifting powers to stomp out dissent amongst the slave population of Apocalypse. And how about that, a so-called revolutionary who did evil to try and free his own oppressed people on Mars happily oppresses an entire group of enslaved people to earn the favor of Darkseid. The irony here is thick. Mala has done so good at this job, Darkseid is ready to give him a new mission and a new partner to follow along. It's the same mysterious man in the bubble who we saw all the way back on Mars running around the Legion and getting involved in their plans. We not only get to see his full face this episode, but learn his name too. Turns out it's a brand new show version of Lord Zod, better known in the comics as the son of General Zod and Ursa. Lore actually has a very long and very complicated comic history involving getting adopted by the Kents, becoming a version of Nightwing. It is a whole thing, and I wonder how much, if any, the show will actually use. Now back with our heroes, thanks to Forager's help, they're able to track down where the bugs took the power cell, and yeah, despite what the new gods had said, the bugs are more than capable of using technology to help uplift themselves to even just basic creature comforts. The standoff between the two different factions gets very tense when we see the mistrust between the races is a two-way street. Hell, our Forager gets reamed out by his own people for basically being a race traitor who spent so long up in the sky he doesn't know what problems are facing everyday bugs like these ones. And you know what? They probably could have talked down this whole situation if it wasn't for Mala hijacking the power cell and turning it into an actual weapon like the ones that the new gods feared. Two larvae end up running away with the device, which causes Orion to give chase. He ends up getting hit during all of the chaos, which in turn uncorks a whole bunch of crazy that he's been keeping bottled up this whole time. The show also does the thing too that newer Orion stories in the comics do, and that is when he does tap into his anger, he ends up actually looking more like his father. Rocket tries to intervene with a force field, but Light Ray tells her that she's probably only making things worse, what with the dude's whole claustrophobia fear. Luckily, Mother Box is able to calm it all down. The day is saved, but this was ultimately one giant disaster, and the Treaty Summit hasn't even started yet. Now, in an excellent piece of writing, Rocket ends up regarding Orion's outburst as some kind of monstrous action. How interesting is it that in the beginning of the show, she was so quick to defend her own son's behavior from strangers who didn't understand him? That he was born that way, that he can't control himself, that he's not a bad person really, yet here we see Rocket condemn Orion for doing more or less the same thing. No doubt this will be part of her character journey for the arc, and learning to be more caring and sympathetic to this guy will be part of it. Now, as the episode comes to a close, we get one last Superboy bombshell. You see, after having all these visions of people he knows, Connor is shocked to come face to face with someone new, someone named General Zod, meaning that yes, this strange realm he's been trapped in for all these episodes was indeed the Phantom Zone all along, home to some of Superman's deadliest foes. I guess we can also take this to mean that Zod has been trapped in the Phantom Zone for a very long time, considering that Superman never thought to tell Connor encounter about one of his most evil and well-known foes? Oh well, I guess these are questions we can ask next time. And so that was The Grasp of the Gods, a very strong debut for this new arc. Rocket was long overdue for some love and some spotlight, and this episode did not disappoint, giving her some real dramatic material to chew on both as a superhero and in her civilian guise. In fact, this might be the most philosophically rich episode of Season 4 so far, with so many different themes and ideas about status and classism all converging together. The Zod family reveal was pretty strong too. I feel like most of DC's major bad guys have been accounted for in Young Justice, and having evil Kryptonians always changes the balance of power in any DC story, and I'm sure this one will be no different. And so that'll just about do it for me in another week, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, and favorite. It helps me a whole lot in this wacky YouTube algorithm game. And I will be sure to see you all next week, same time, same place, for more Young Justice.